And the point I wanted to come on to next was around why procurement transformations, in some cases, or perhaps in many cases, actually fail. Because I think certainly from briefly chatting with you about this before, you had quite an interesting perspective on this, in the sense that a lot of them don't even get off the ground in the first place.
Pressure's really on, isn't it, when someone says you've got an interesting perspective?
I've built that right up there, haven't I?
Yeah, the little voice at the back of your mind starts going, oh no, what was that? Did you actually say something interesting? I mean, you can be shaped by your own experiences, can't you? And in many ways, well, I suppose in many ways that's right. But I sort of see 4 stages of sort of transformation. And the first one is that sort of case for change. It's that upfront piece before you've sort of gone and secured the budget and got everyone aligned, and then you can sort of move into design, the change itself, and then what happens afterwards. And transformations fail at all stages of that. Any project can fail at all stages of that. But I think it's probably a bit like Dragon's Den, right, or whatever it's called in other countries, Shark Tank, and I don't know, whatever. But it's probably a bit like that, isn't it? Right? A bunch of people go in with this case for change and this pitch, and they're after investment. And the people sat there know that they're not going to invest in everything that comes through the door that day. They're going to try and pick the best things that they see. And some of them win and some of them don't. And generally speaking, they win because there's something interesting that they've done. The economics stack up. They're on top of it. They're inspiring. And they inspire belief in the person who's got the money. And it's not that different, is it, when you're going in and pitching a transformation or a project or whatever. And here's because I'm a consultant and because part of my responsibility is marketing, I love surveys.
Right.
Because that's what happens, isn't it? You go and survey people and then you go, 60% of people don't like surveys or something like that. And but we did one about 4 or 5 years ago when sort of best of breed narrative was sort of bubbling under, and we were really seeking to figure out whether people were going to follow this best of breed route. But we were also looking at sort of digital transformation, and as we sort of called it back then before it became unfashionable. And we asked people about transformations failing and success, et cetera, and the thing that really struck me was that there was a question in there about whether or not your transformation would be perceived as a success before and we uncovered that about 30-40% of the 2,000 or so people who answered thought that the transformations that they would go on would be deemed a failure, but that was before they'd even started them.
Right.
And so there was this feeling that before you start, are you starting out to succeed or starting out to fail? Now that can be a number of things, can't it? It can be your confidence of getting the investment. It can be the perception that you're painting and will it live up to it, et cetera, et cetera. And then the follow-up question was that a similar percentage, or something like 40-50%, were concerned that they were not going to be able to go and get the blessing and the funding from the exec. So for all that talk of seeing the stats coming out about 70% or 5 out of 6 transformations fail or whatever, I think a load fail before they've even got through the Dragon's Den.
Well, it's like a funnel, isn't it? That's probably the highest percentage failure point at that stage, as the funnel kind of narrows down to those that get past step 1 and step 2 and step 3. I think it's a really interesting analogy you make about Dragon's Den, because absolutely, as far as the whoever's signing off the budget goes, they're not just looking at this one opportunity. It's not just a question of is this worth the money?
Yeah.
It's is this more important than doing X? And it's like a guy that I've done a lot of work with in the past always used to say to me, when you're talking about company budgets, yeah, but Johnny, they've got to tarmac the car park as well. It's just.
Do you know, that's really, really interesting, because when I was on one of my sort of procure tech adventures, 2-time failed procure tech adventurer, on the first one, I sort of cottoned on to the idea that, 2 things really make people act or make people release funding. It's it's fear or opportunity.
Yeah.
But fear is the much more successful of the two. A lot of the transformation cases that you will take into, in procurement at least, compare it to finance. So finance transformation in the old days, a BPO, would essentially be, right, we're paying X and we're going to pay Y, and it's going to save us 25%, whatever. And the guy across the table knows that he's going to go through a bit of pain, but actually he thinks, right, well, even if we get 50% of that, we're paying X and we're going to get Y plus whatever. That's not a bad case. Let's go for it. And then a procurement transformation walks through and says, well, we're doing it this way, and if we do it this way, we could save X, and the ROI is going to be this. And it's a hypothetical ROI. It's not head paying this, getting that.
It's always a more complex measurement. I mean, it's
yeah.
People are working towards it, but it's much more complex than just saying we're currently paying X and it's then going to cost Y.
Yeah, and you're saying that to someone across the table who's probably, let's say they've got a procurement function today, maybe doesn't necessarily bank the savings on the bottom line, doesn't necessarily believe the ROI. There's all these doubts swirling around in their mind, which it might be a brilliant story, it might absolutely be true, but there's those doubts swirling around in their mind. Whereas if you walk in and say, if we do not buy this piece of tech, we are going to fall foul of regulation X, or there is this risk, or blah blah blah. Generally speaking, that inspires people to act more, which is a sad state of affairs, right? But I think fear can be a great motivator.